Leaders of both parties, in the meantime, both parties in the House of Representatives were scrambling last night to try and get enough members back to Washington, D.C. to override a procedural block on the stimulus bill by one Kentucky congressman. Eamon Javers joins us right now with more on this. And Eamon, every time we think they've cleared the last hurdle, another one pops up.
Yeah, Becky, look, there's no question this bill is going to pass the House of Representatives. There are overwhelming votes for it. The question is just now when. They had thought they'd be able to do it today just by acclamation, in essence, on the House floor with no objections. But if any member objects, that could throw a wrinkle in the process. And that looks like that may be what's happening here. Thomas Massie of Kentucky has been suggesting, or is a lot of speculation around this idea that he would be the one to object. That means they've got to have a quorum on the House floor, which means they've got to get 216 members of Congress physically back to the House floor. They're all scattered across the country right now with these flight cancellations, the quarantine issues for the New York members of Congress. A number of them actually diagnosed with COVID already. That's going to be tricky. So one congressman says he's driving back 10 hours from Michigan now in order to be here today for the vote. We'll see whether they can get that done. In any case, they're going to vote on this. It might be today, might be tomorrow, might be over the weekend, but ultimately this will get done. It's just now a procedural hurdle here. Meanwhile, there is a fight over the cruise lines and exactly how this bailout money might impact that industry. Remember, a lot of the cruise lines are incorporated in offshore tax havens to avoid U.S. taxes. That's politically causing a problem for them to get access to the aid package. Here's what the president said about them just yesterday.
I do like the concept of perhaps coming in and registering here, coming into the United States. It's very tough to make a loan to a company when they're based in a different country. But with that being said, they have thousands and thousands of people that work there, and maybe almost as importantly, that work on shore, filling these ships with goods and products. And the cruise line business is very important.
So that's just one of a number of different problems that Washington is working through right now. The big question is, Monday is the 15th day of the 15-day shutdown that the president announced. Now there's some issue about what the president's going to do next week in terms of reopening the country, whether he even has the authority at this point to order that. They're working on a county-by-county survey at the White House to figure out which counties they can declare safe and how they might be able to suggest that the country go about restarting its business. Not at all clear, guys, at this point where that's going to land, because the advice from the economic team and the advice from the medical team are very, very different on this issue.
Hey, Eamon, just talking to a friend. Just talking to a friend who lives in Minneapolis. They're not even getting to the point where they do the lockdown until tomorrow night, I think, or tonight maybe.
Right. Yeah, this is rolled out very unevenly across the states, and some of the governors have been calling for a massive nationwide lockdown in order to have all the states do this all at once. I mean, the county-by-county issue is really tricky, right? Because if you declare one county is, relatively virus-free and safe, the county next door is not, how are you going to prevent people from walking across the border county to county or just getting in their cars and going to a county that's been designated as safe? It's very tricky to lock the entire country down, but some people have been calling for a national approach. The president doesn't like that. He wants to do it state by state, and he wants to start opening rather than closing even more.
Eamon, though, can you just speak to this, especially the small business owners who are watching us this morning? Because I keep getting notes from people throughout the day saying, well, I keep hearing that the president's going to try to reopen parts of the country. I think I'm in a part of the country that might actually not have been as affected. I know one person who has it, but realistically, given the advice of Anthony Fauci, given the advice that we've heard from Scott Gottlieb on this network so many times, is it realistic to believe that we're going to be reopening any part of this country in any meaningful way over the next 2 weeks?
Look, I don't see it from where I stand. I'm, hunkered down in my house outside of Washington, D.C. right now, as you can tell. It doesn't feel that way. I think the more important political leaders on this issue are going to be the school boards across the country rather than the president in Washington, D.C. The school boards are going to look at this, look at the medical advice, look at what they're getting from their state and local leaders, and decide whether students can go back to school. That's going to impact whether parents and workers can go back to their places of business. It's going to be very hard for places of business to try to reopen in any kind of massive way when students are still home from school, because parents won't have anything to do with their kids. It's just the child care issue is enormous. The commute issue is enormous. So I think school board leaders are going to be the most powerful figures in this country in deciding that for all of us.
And the other question I was going to ask is, any reaction? There was a piece in the New York Times overnight about haggling that the White House seemed to be doing over the price of ventilators, and then this comment that the president made on Hannity last evening, suggesting that he did not think that New York State was going to need 30,000 ventilators. Of course, that causing quite a commotion in the state of New York, the fact that he'd be making those comments since health experts and other advisors have been saying that's the number that they need.
Yeah, look, the New York Times is reporting that the White House considered an effort to spend about $1 billion on new ventilators and then scrapped that effort after there were some questions about the cost of it and how many ventilators you would get as a result of that spending. New York Governor Cuomo has been adamant about this, that he needs 30,000 ventilators in his state immediately. He's been saying that the federal effort is not nearly enough. To send 4,000 ventilators is what the vice president promised this week. The president dismissive on Hannity last night of that claim of 30,000, a need for 30,000 ventilators, saying he's just skeptical of that. And the president has really been at odds with a number of the governors around the country who are clamoring for more federal action, more aid to the states financially, and in terms of this ventilator and supply issue. The president has complained that a number of the governors simply are complaining to him and that they ought to be taking the lead here. The president wants to follow here. He does not want to lead. He wants the states to be in charge of this response. And he has said that publicly again and again. And he's skeptical of the worst case scenario planning that we've seen since day one of this. So he's just at odds with some of what the governors are saying, and we'll see where that resolves.